Welcome back to The Explainer. This is the place where we take those really complex business frameworks and turn them into crystal clear, actionable insights. If you've ever wanted to know how the gears of a truly massive enterprise actually turn, well, you're absolutely in the right place. Today, we're taking a deep dive into the true engine of modern commerce, information systems. We're going to look at how day-to-day business processes and their underlying IT infrastructures do a whole lot more than just keep the lights on. They actually build the foundational machinery for total global strategic dominance.
I mean, really think about it for a second. We all shop online, right? But how does a simple digital click at checkout actually ripple through an entire massive organization to ultimately create a global competitive advantage? In this explainer, we're adopting a real micro to macro systems thinking approach. We're going to completely unpack the hidden digital machinery that takes a single isolated transaction and transforms it into a highly calibrated competitive weapon.
Okay, let's dive into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, we'll look at the anatomy of business. Second, the infrastructure machinery. Third, collaboration in the digital age. Fourth, conquering competitive forces. And finally, optimizing the value chain. Let's just jump right in.
Section 1. The anatomy of business, or what I like to call the ground floor. Before we can even begin to talk about high-level strategy, we have to understand that every single business is essentially a massive collection of interconnected routines. Let's look at fulfilling a basic customer order. It seems super simple on the surface, but in an enterprise, a single click triggers a massive cascade of complex cross-departmental business processes. Let's trace it. First, the sales department receives the order, but they can't just box it up and ship it. That order has to pass over to accounting to ensure the customer actually has the credit to pay for it. Only after that credit is verified can manufacturing step in to pull the inventory or actually assemble the product. And finally, logistics gets involved to ship it out, while accounting circles back around to generate the final invoice. It's incredibly coordinated.
Notice the horizontal flow here. Sales passes data down to accounting, which then triggers actions over in manufacturing. Now, in a traditional manual system, this sequential passing of the baton takes days, and honestly, it's highly prone to human error. Somebody loses a piece of paper, and the whole thing grinds to a halt. But computer-based information systems automate these exact steps and completely transform the flow of information. Suddenly, these sequential steps can happen simultaneously. Sales, accounting, and manufacturing can all access the exact same data instantly, completely eliminating those traditional delays in decision-making.
Moving right along to Section 2, the infrastructure machinery and how these systems actually connect.
So how does that horizontal flow actually happen behind the scenes? The absolute bedrock of this hidden digital machinery is the transaction processing system, or the TPS. A TPS is the data management software used right at the exact moment a business transaction occurs. Imagine a customer at a grocery store purchasing a bag of coffee beans. When they swipe their credit card at the point-of-sale terminal, the TPS just leaps into action. It collects the raw card information, communicates with the bank, approves the purchase, and immediately adjusts the store's inventory. That is your raw, ground-floor data capture. And to put that into perspective, major retailers process thousands of these TPS events every single second. It creates an absolute ocean of raw data. And this brilliantly illustrates where that ocean of raw data actually goes. It flows upward. If you follow the flow from left to right, you see the transaction processing systems on the left, your order files, production master files, accounting files. These systems feed all their raw, day-to-day transaction data directly into the Management Information Systems, or MIS, right there in the center. The MIS takes that data and synthesizes it into structured sales files, unit product costs, and expense data. Finally, on the right, it outputs actionable intelligence. We're talking reports, online displays, and dashboards. So when a manager is looking at a beautifully formatted dashboard on their screen, they're actually looking at the aggregated result of thousands of individual TPS events, just like that single bag of coffee beans being scanned.
All right, Section 3, Collaboration in the Digital Age. Connecting the modern workforce.
Having all this beautifully integrated data is fantastic, for sure. But today's post-industrial organizations are becoming much, much flatter. They rely incredibly heavily on decentralized decision-making and teamwork across borders. But global e-business introduces immense physical challenges. Think about this. How do you actually effectively collaborate on a complex project when midnight in New York is exactly noon in Dhaka? Unless someone is living on a strict diet of espresso, time and physical space become massive hurdles to getting things done. To solve this logistical nightmare, organizations use the time/space collaboration matrix. It basically maps out tools based on whether collaboration happens at the same time, meaning synchronous, or at different times, asynchronous, and whether it happens in the same place, co-located, or different places, remote. If your whole team is in one room at the same time, great, you just use a decision room or wall displays. But for that New York and Dhaka team, they live in the bottom right quadrant, different place, different time. A live video conference simply isn't going to work. Instead, information systems have to provide really robust asynchronous tools. Think shared wikis where documentation is constantly updated, cloud-based version control for software, and deeply integrated email systems. This is what ensures the global machinery keeps humming, without requiring everyone to be awake at the same time.
Which brings us to Section 4, conquering competitive forces, out on the macro battlefield.
Okay, we have the internal processes mapped, the data captured, and the global teams collaborating. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is how Michael Porter's famous competitive forces model visualizes the external pressures every single firm faces. Armed with deep data pipelines, a firm isn't just fighting its traditional competitors right there in the center, it's constantly under pressure from 4 other massive forces. There's the threat of new market entrants, agile startups with fresh tech. There's the threat of substitute products, like customers streaming music instead of buying physical media. Then you have the bargaining power of your customers, who can easily just hop online and find cheaper prices. And finally, the bargaining power of your suppliers, who can completely squeeze your profit margins by raising the cost of their materials. So what is a firm supposed to do when faced with all these external pressures? How do they actually fight back? Well, there are 4 generic strategies organizations use, and information technology is the primary enabler for every single one of them. You can use IT to achieve low-cost leadership. You can use it for product differentiation. You can use it to focus on a highly specific market niche. Or you can use it to significantly strengthen intimacy with both your customers and your suppliers. Let's ground this theory in some deep reality and see exactly how industry giants use information systems as strategic weaponry. For low-cost leadership, Walmart uses a continuous replenishment system. Their point-of-sale system automatically updates their supplier's database the exact millisecond a barcode is scanned. This triggers automatic shipments and virtually eliminates expensive warehouse storage costs. For differentiation, Google creates entirely new IT-enabled services like Google Maps to stand out from the pack. For a niche focus, Apple uses intense data mining to target highly specific demographics, like graphic designers. And for intimacy, Amazon tracks your exact preferences to recommend products. This builds such a hyper-personalized experience that it creates high switching costs, meaning it's literally just too inconvenient for you to leave and try to shop somewhere else. Finally, Section 5, optimizing the value chain and the evolution of value. Executing those competitive strategies requires flawless operational excellence. And to achieve this, organizations rely on the value chain model, which identifies every specific activity where value is added to a product or service. On the bottom half, we have the primary activities, the physical steps of creating and selling, like inbound logistics, manufacturing operations, outbound shipping, sales, and service. But look at the top half, the support activities. This includes human resources, technology development, and procurement. Here's the deep takeaway. You absolutely cannot optimize your primary manufacturing operations if your technology development support hasn't implemented the right computer-aided design systems. The entire chain has to be analyzed together. Think about your own company. Are your support activities actually enabling your primary output, or are they just creating bottlenecks? Let's move to and see how this builds, because the modern internet has completely evolved this concept. We've moved away from a traditional linear chain, a rigid step-by-step process happening entirely within the walls of a single firm, to a dynamic value web. A value web is a synchronized, highly flexible network of completely independent firms that use information systems to coordinate their individual value chains. Think of how a company like Uber coordinates independent drivers, riders, maps, and payment gateways into one seamless platform. It's not a rigid internal chain anymore. It is an adaptable, global ecosystem coordinated entirely by IT. We've traveled all the way from the ground floor of a single credit card swipe up to the global orchestration of a massive value web. It really all connects. So I want to leave you with this critical question to think about. As disruptive technologies like artificial intelligence continue to flatten hierarchies and automate routines faster than ever, is your organization still building a rigid linear chain? Or are you using information systems to weave an adaptable global value web? Honestly, the answer might just determine whether you survive the competitive forces of tomorrow. Thanks so much for diving deep with me on this explainer. Keep learning, keep analyzing, and I'll see you in the next one.